Hi, my name is Chris and this is Battle Nonsense. Last year DiceLA introduced the network performance graph in Battlefield 4, which allows you to monitor your latency, packet loss, packet queue, how many shots you fired, how many of those were registered as hit by a client, and how many of those hits were registered or confirmed by the server. Before the spring patch, only PC users had access to this tool because on the PC the developers can pretty much do what they want and they don't have to ask anyone what they are allowed to include in the game. This is very different on the console because Microsoft and Sony make the rules there and they can pretty much dictate what the developers are allowed to include in the game and what they are not allowed to include. So since the spring patch, Xbox One owners now also have access to the network performance graph because Microsoft allowed DiceLA to put it into the game, and a lot of players already take use of it. On the PlayStation 4 it is sadly still not available. Now, since more and more players enable the network performance graph on their systems, they start to see issues that they have with their connection, like too high latency or latency spikes or packet loss. But what they also see is that the difference between the client hits and the server hits gets bigger and bigger the longer you play, which leads to the players assuming that a lot of the hits were rejected by the server. Which is not the case, and I will explain why. So when I shoot at another player, then the graph shows me one fired shot, one hit was registered by the client, and one hit was registered or confirmed by the server, because Battlefield uses a client-side, server-authoritative hit registration since Battlefield 3. Now, what happens when I shoot a helicopter? The graph shows me one fired shot, one hit client, no hit server, and no hit marker, because the hit marker is linked to the hit confirmation that we receive from the server. So why did this happen? Our bullet did hit the helicopter and that's why we got the hit client. But this hit did not deal any damage and that's why there was no confirmation from the server. It's the same when the helicopter fires at the tank. We get a ton of fired shots and hit client, but no hit server and no hit marker, because the tank does not take any damage. When I now try to shoot at the pilot, then something interesting happens. We see one fired shot, two client hits, but only one server hit confirmation. That's because the bullet first hits the helicopter and then the pilot, so we get two client hits. The reason why we only get one server hit confirmation is because our bullet is only able to damage the pilot, but not the helicopter. So, generally speaking, your client figures out if your projectile hits something. Then it sends that information to the server, which will confirm or reject your hit. If your hit gets confirmed, then you will see the hit marker and the player that you hit will take damage. But there are a few exceptions. When you kill someone with a grenade, then you will only get a hit server, because it's the server that figures out who takes damage from a grenade. It's the same for C4, the UCAV, the airburst, the mortar, the TV missile, the missiles from the attack helicopter, the grenade launcher and a few others. So if you see that your hit server becomes higher than your hit client, then this is normal. But the server can of course also reject your hit, which can happen when your latency is too high, because then your client will register a hit, but the server will not confirm it as the player was not where you seen him due to your latency. In my opinion, the server could even reject the hits a bit earlier, because that would then help with the issue of taking damage behind cover. So that's the basic explanation of how the hit registration and the network performance graph works, but there is also one bug that has been fixed in the CTE but still exists in the retail version of Battlefield 4, which can increase the difference between the hit client and the hit server values. Those of you who watched my previous videos will know which bug that is. It's the collecting of damage. So in short, when you fire at a player and hit him 4 times, then the client registers the first hit, sends that hit to the server confirms your hit, sends the confirmation to your client, which makes the hit marker appear on your screen, and the server then sends also the damage to the client of the player that you hit, so he will take damage. The same happens for the next hits. So the player that you shoot receives each individual hit just like you hit him on your screen. This means that you get 4 hits client and 4 hits server. Now that collecting of damage issue causes that the damage of multiple shots gets collected or bundled into one single update. This means that you get one confirmation from the server for 2 client hits, and the other player gets the damage of both of your hits in just one update, which means that he will in example receive 42 damage in a single update rather than receive 2 updates with 21 damage. This problem then intensifies the damage around cover issue, and it also causes that players get frustrated as they feel that they die too fast or accuse other players to use damage hacks, while they actually suffer from this collecting of damage issue. So again, all 4 shots were registered as hits. The damage of all 4 hits reached the player you shot, but you only receive 3 confirmations from the server because 2 hits were sent in one update. In the CTE this issue has been fixed before the spring patch was released, but sadly this fix arrived too late and so it could not be included in this patch, which means that we have to wait for the summer patch to finally get this annoying issue fixed in retail. Now before I end the video, I want to quickly go over the values that you see in the network performance graph in the retail version of Battlefield 4, because many players don't know what some of them mean. In Battlefield 4 you can receive updates from the server at 10, 15, 20 or 30 Hz. Which rate is used is determined by your internet connection and the game will choose the best rate for you. You will usually see 30 here. The next one is the latency, which is a bit confusing because it will always be higher than your ping that you see in the scoreboard or the server browser. The reason for that is that the ping is an ICMP echo request that is answered instantly by the physical server on which the Battlefield 4 server instance is running on. This means that it does not include any additional game delays. The latency in the graph, on the other hand, does include the processing delays from both the game server and the game client, which means that the latency value gives you a better idea of the actual delays that occur in-game. Lower numbers are better than higher ones, since delays are bad. Then we have the packet loss in and outbound. These are percentage values which tell you how many % of the data that you send or receive does not reach its destination. It's obviously bad when packets get lost, so this should always be as low as possible. Then there's the packet queue. This is the amount of packets that are piling up inside of your client and wait to be sent to the server, or where your client is waiting for the server to confirm that it received the packet. Mine is always between 1 and 2, but according to the developers you should be fine as long as it stays below 20. And then there's the shots fired, hits client and hits server, which I don't need to explain again as these were the main topic of this video. So that's the network performance graph that we have in retail, but if you paid attention to the gameplay that I showed, then you might have noticed that the graph looks a bit different in the CTE. The update value now displays the tick rate that the game is running at, because in the CTE servers can now run at more than 30 Hz. And your client will always receive data from the server at that rate. The next one is the latency variation. It gives you a percentage value of how much your latency is going up and down. If your latency is changing a lot, then this is bad for your experience because the server then needs to constantly readjust to your current latency. The developers also reworked the existing warning icons and added new ones, which I explained in my previous video. Hopefully all of that will be included in the summer patch. I hope that I could help you to get a better understanding of how the hit registration works in Battlefield and what those numbers in the network performance graph mean. If you have any further questions, then please leave them in the comments down below and I will as always try to answer as many of them as possible. If you enjoyed this video, then give it a like, subscribe for more, and I hope to see you next time. Until then, have a nice day and take care. My name is Chris and this was Battle Nonsense.